Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak in this debate and would like to declare an interest in that my wife is a general practitioner. Mr. Speaker, it is an oft-stated and true fact that the NHS holds a special place in the hearts of British people. That's why it's so important that this vital institution is managed effectively and in a sustainable way so that our children and our grandchildren can continue to use and rely on the NHS in the years to come. But the problem, Mr. Deputy Speaker, with the cherished position that the NHS holds is that it makes it difficult to discuss and debate the future of the NHS dispassionately. It's extremely important that we in this House are able to discuss NHS reform sensibly and without the hyperbole and hysteria evidenced by the Shadow Minister in his opening remarks and by the frankly disgusting remarks of the member for Eltham, which were not worthy of this chamber. The previous government, who undertook considerable, frequent and, dare I say it, well-intentioned reorganisations of the NHS, themselves found that each reorganisation was opposed by a variety of interests and for a variety of reasons. And while the previous government spent too much time reorganising the bureaucracy of the NHS and generally adding to it on each occasion, I actually welcomed some of the reforms of the previous government, and I'm happy to say so. Foundation trusts and a greater involvement of private and other providers being notable examples. However, in too many cases, previous reforms took the form of shuffling the management deck chairs. Strategic health authorities and primary care trusts were reorganised and reorganised again, often before the ink at the top of the old letterheads had dried, while the number of bureaucrats soared relentlessly. But the challenges faced by the NHS going forward are considerable, and to deny the need for further change is dangerous. Cost pressures within the NHS are rising. This has in part been driven by the blunt way in which the previous government pushed up health spending without insisting on robustly improving outcomes alongside that increased spending. As a result, we have seen productivity fall, a trend that must be reversed if the NHS spending model is to be sustainable. But that healthcare inflation has also been driven by outside factors. Costly new drugs and new treatments, coupled with an ageing population, have created serious challenges and will continue to do so as we go forward. Mr. Speaker, it is a hard-headed analysis of these demographic changes that has, I believe, led the coalition government, rightly, to commit to ring-fencing the NHS from government spending cuts and to guarantee real terms increases in NHS spending, a commitment, I might add, not matched by the party opposite. But with the privilege of a ring-fenced budget, Mr. Deputy Speaker, comes a responsibility on the side of the NHS to maximise productivity and efficiency to ensure the best possible clinical outcomes for patients within that budget settlement. With pleasure.
Can you explain to me why, if it's a ring-fenced budget, why does the Royal College of Nurses believe there's going to be 27,000 fewer nurses in a year's time?
Well, I would say to the honourable member that the NHS budget is going up in real terms every year. He can see that by looking at the books. Now, we are all aware that the system that we inherited had problems going forward because of the high management costs and other structural problems within the NHS. There are going to be no shortage of nurses as a result of any underfunding by the current government. I can assure him of that. With pleasure.
Would the honourable member accept the Royal College of Midwives figures that in 1997 they had more midwives than margins in the NHS, and in 2009 there were 18,000 more margins than midwives in the NHS?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for making exactly the point that the NHS cannot carry on going forward with the sorts of management levels and layers of bureaucracy that we've seen put in place by the previous government. With an ageing population, it is even more important that the largest possible slice of the NHS budget is spent going forward on patient care and as little as possible on management and administration. And reform of the commissioning process is central to that. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the bill before the House has been criticised by some members opposite for doing that which we on this side of the House have in the past been critical of, namely reorganising the management structures of the NHS yet again. But anyone who looks at this bill honestly and dispassionately will see that this bill does not reorganise NHS management structures. It sweeps away a whole tier of NHS management structure. It is not another round of shuffling the management deck chairs. It is a bonfire of some of those management deck chairs. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I strongly welcome the effect of this bill in abolishing the primary care trusts and putting general practitioners in charge of commissioning services on behalf of their patients. I criticise nobody who works within the PCTs, but I freely criticise the structure that currently puts healthcare commissioning in a bureaucratic body that operates at arm's length from patients and at arm's length from doctors. I'm conscious that many others still wish to speak, Mr Deputy Speaker, so I will draw my remarks to a close with one plea to the Minister. My understanding is that the new GP commissioning process will see GP consortia, in effect, being given control of two budgets: the budget for clinical services and a small budget for covering the management costs of taking over the commissioning process. It is also my understanding that they will not be permitted to transfer unspent funds from the management budget across to the clinical budget. Mr Deputy Speaker, if my understanding of that is correct, can I urge the Minister to reconsider that restriction? In giving the consortia a budget for management that cannot be transferred across to the clinical budget, they give no incentive for the consortia to drive down their back office costs. For this process to work most efficiently, GP consortia must have an incentive to drive down those back office costs in the knowledge that this will allow them to spend more on their patients. To do otherwise gives the incentive to use up the management budget regardless of need, to hire that extra secretary, not because there is a need, but because the budget is there to do so. Mr Deputy Speaker, it is exactly that type of unfortunate incentive from central governments over the years that have led to so many problems throughout the public sector with productivity and a use it or lose it culture. So I urge the Minister to look again at this restriction, which seems to go against the new culture of efficiency and responsibility for budgets that we're trying to instil across the public sector. On that note, Mr Speaker, I finish.